In this video, we're going to look at our second installment of our composition concepts. So it's Composition Concepts 2.0. Pretty exciting. Now this one has fewer concepts, but they're a little bit more artistic or they're a little bit more interpretive. So that's why I wanted to limit them so you're not overwhelmed with just a whole bunch of different composition concepts, but you have just a few that you're going to practice and try to make your best. So let's take a look at these here that we have in 2.0. So these are the concepts: simplicity, lines, framing, and then the last one again is like in the Composition Concepts 1.0. It's just something that you want to think about. It's not really a composition strategy. It's just something you want to think about, and that's avoiding mergers. So simplicity as a concept is the idea that you want to limit what's seen in the frame and keep it simple and bold. Oftentimes, bold, simple, not busy is going to make this really, really satisfying. So here you have, a coffee cup, and notice it's in a white mug, but there's no like dripping. It's not like spilled over the side. It's balanced within this plate really nicely. And then you have these 3 coffee beans. Now this is silly. Like you'd never just have 3 coffee beans sitting out here. But what it does is it helps to illustrate kind of, what goes into the coffee, and it helps to offset that a little bit. When we talk about balancing elements, it kind of offers a little bit of that, but it's simple, bold, and makes its point. In the next illustration of it, there's just, again, here 2 chopsticks on a setting, and it's on leather. Very simple. It's not busy. There's not a whole bunch going on. Notice there's no like food. It's not like a whole bunch of stuff just scattered around. It's clearly very intentional. And notice, as it says here on the PowerPoint, it's about less being more and really focusing on a certain thing and showcasing what's beautiful about that one thing. Oftentimes, as you'll notice in both of these images and in the next example here, it's also a macro shot. Now, we haven't talked about macro shots, but what macro shots are images that are really close in, and they generally are 1-to-1 scale size. So you're trying to make things look like they're bigger versus, something that's far away or it's really small in the frame. You're trying to really draw the viewer into that thing. So you want to get really close in on your image versus being, again, far away. Okay, our next example of simplicity is a little bit more abstract, and I'd say a little bit more where you're interpreting simplicity. So notice this actually has a little bit more busyness. There's multiple colors here in the field, but it's still really simple with the one single tree, which is a little cliche, but it's fine. The one simple tree in the middle of the desolate landscape. Okay, our next composition strategy is lines, which is really abstract, and it's something you just need to look out for. And that's the idea of lines that might be in our world. One place that you're going to see lines are on like your blinds on a window, for instance. You're going to see lines. People's clothes oftentimes have a lot of lines on them. Here, it's a really interesting illustration of what might be like an overhang. If you have a pergola in your backyard, that's illustrating lines. But what makes this picture something interesting is the boldness of the yellow, of course, but also the shadows that are drawing lines down from the overhang or the pergola. In the next image, as you see here, lines can be really cool to help make a picture a little bit more engaging than it would have been in the past. So here you have these lines on the slide that the child here is sliding down into the water. And the lines help to just bring in an element of interest into the image that is otherwise not like a great image, but it adds that level of boldness to it. So you might want to look out for lines. Again, examples here: roads, rivers, shoreline, or a horizon. In your composition concepts number 1, right, you had leading lines, and that's exactly a line concept. It's just a different way to think about it. Here, so again, here is a leading line, an example of leading lines, but notice all those lines that are involved here and how that draws in the reader, or the viewer, here. So here's some just rules of thumb. Horizontal lines are calm. Vertical lines, which are these vertical lines, illustrate strength, and diagonal lines are more dynamic. It's really cool, of course, whenever you have lines that are broken up by a single object. It just adds, again, that dynamism to it. So diagonal lines are maybe the most interesting of straight lines, and you can see these diagonal lines here. But notice how also nature can create those lines. And so again, when we talk about interpretation or trying to be a little bit more abstract with it, that's something you could think about. Now, of course, if any of you took this shot, that'd be just phenomenal, so go for it. But this really, as it suggests, this line here is really satisfying to the viewer. Other types of lines are for, maybe leading the viewer in, as we've talked about before. So an escalator, that's a really cool example of a leading line. But remember, it's always leading up to something. And same with this leading line as that road draws you in. There's also some really satisfying lines that are like S-curves. And so it's a leading line, but it's that S-curve that draws you into the image. Okay, our next one is one that we talked about in composition concepts number 1, but it's just to kind of re-emphasize that, and that's that idea of framing. This is a cool one that I've always liked because it makes it almost look like a painting, but it has this natural landscape, and it utilizes the frame that's built in the house to make it stand out a little bit more. Here, of course, you have a cliff, cave, or whatever this might be, and that, again, is framing that landscape. What it does is it helps to take what might be just kind of a run-of-the-mill shot of a landscape and just add some dynamism to that, makes it more engaging. The next image illustrates a bridge, and Portland's great for this, Bridge City, right? Using that bridge, it helps to illustrate that worker out here, and again, just make it a little bit more dynamic. This one is good. What I would just caution you about is if you have colors that are similar between your frame and the background, it can actually kind of lose meaning. It can make it less engaging because the frame gets a little bit lost in the background here, and it doesn't quite do what the intention should be. So just watch that. Think about contrasts always. Next, you have frames that are kind of fun to play around with if you've never done this before. And that's just doing a frame where it creates an illusion. So here's someone like pretending to hold the sun. Just be careful if you're ever shooting a picture of the sun. Don't do it, first of all, if it's midday, bright sun. You can damage your eye pretty significantly. But if it's hazy and the sun, like during those fires, and the sun is really diffused, that can actually be okay. Just be careful. I'd rather you practice with something like the moon or a street lamp or something like that. Don't shoot a picture of the sun per se. Okay, our next one is more of a caution, and that's to avoid mergers. You really want to watch out for this. So be careful when something in your foreground merges into your background and it feels like they're layered on top of one another. So this next image is maybe a little bit better. So here, this little cute, stuffed animal looks like there's a plant sticking out of his head, which is kind of funny. And if you change your angle, now this becomes kind of a complementary element in the background versus something that looks like it's flattened on the teddy bear's background. So watch out for those merging angles. This one's where you really can see it. And this is where you might have seen, and you might have taken pictures like this, where this giraffe almost looks like it has two heads at quick glance. So in this case, if you're at the zoo taking a picture of animals, be patient. The animals will move. Your subject will move, or you can move yourself. But be patient and think about how you can avoid those mergers. So that's our composition overview for Strategies 2.0. You're going to be using this, of course, throughout the class and thinking about how to best compose your images.